Right now, as you're watching this video, there's a part of yourself that you absolutely refuse to acknowledge. It's sitting in the shadows of your mind, growing stronger every day you ignore it. And according to Carl Jung, one of psychology's greatest minds, this hidden part of yourself isn't just influencing your decisions. It's actively sabotaging your relationships, your career, and your happiness. Jung called this your shadow. And he believed that until you face it, you'll keep repeating the same destructive patterns over and over again. But here's what's terrifying. Most people spend their entire lives running from their shadow, never realizing that the very thing they're hiding from could be the key to everything they want. Stay with me, because I'm going to show you exactly what your shadow is, why you're so afraid to look at it, and most importantly, how acknowledging it could completely transform your life. Carl Jung discovered something that most people find deeply uncomfortable. We all have a shadow. But this isn't some mystical concept. It's one of the most practical and powerful ideas in all of psychology. Your shadow is everything about yourself that you decided is unacceptable. It's every trait, every impulse, every thought that you've pushed down because society, your family, or your own moral code told you was bad or wrong. Think about it this way. When you were a child, you were pure, unfiltered potential. You felt anger, jealousy, selfishness, aggression, sexuality, and 100 other unacceptable emotions. But as you grew up, you learned to hide these parts of yourself. You created what Jung called a persona, a mask that shows the world only your acceptable qualities. But here's the crucial part that most people miss. Those rejected parts of yourself didn't disappear. They went underground. They formed your shadow. Let me give you a concrete example. Sarah is a successful marketing executive who prides herself on being kind, collaborative, and supportive. She's built her entire identity around being the nice one. But deep in her shadow lies a fierce competitiveness and a ruthless ambition that she's never acknowledged. What happens? Sarah finds herself mysteriously forgetting to include a colleague's ideas and presentations. She makes subtle comments that undermine her peers. She smiles while doing it, never admitting, even to herself, what she's really doing. Her shadow is running the show, but because she refuses to see it, she can't control it. And this brings us to the first devastating way your shadow destroys your life. It makes you unconsciously become everything you claim to hate. Jung discovered something that will blow your mind. We don't just hide our shadow traits from others. We project them onto everyone around us. We become obsessed with seeing in others the exact qualities we refuse to see in ourselves. Have you ever noticed how the people who constantly complain about fake people are often the most inauthentic ones in the room? Or how those who are always pointing out others' selfishness are usually the most self-centered? This isn't coincidence. This is shadow projection in action. I once knew a man, let's call him Mark, who was absolutely obsessed with calling out manipulative people. He could spot manipulation everywhere. In his wife's requests, his boss's feedback, his friends' suggestions. Mark prided himself on being direct and honest. But Mark's shadow contained a master manipulator. He would use guilt trips, silent treatments, and emotional withdrawal to get his way. He'd make cutting remarks disguised as brutal honesty. But because he refused to see this part of himself, he projected it onto everyone else. The result? Mark destroyed every meaningful relationship in his life. His wife left him. His friends avoided him. His career stagnated because no one wanted to work with someone who saw enemies everywhere. This is how your shadow destroys your life. It makes you fight battles that don't exist while ignoring the real war happening inside yourself. But projection is just the beginning. There's something even more insidious happening when you refuse to face your shadow. Jung noticed that people who refuse to acknowledge their shadow get emotionally hijacked by situations that trigger their hidden traits. They have massive overreactions that seem to come out of nowhere. Picture this. You're scrolling through social media and you see someone posting about their promotion, their perfect relationship, or their amazing vacation. Suddenly, you feel this surge of anger, resentment, or inadequacy that seems way too intense for the situation. What's happening? Your shadow contains envy, comparison, and maybe even a sense of entitlement that you've never acknowledged. When you see others succeeding, these shadow emotions explode. But because you refuse to own them, you blame the other person for showing off or being fake. Or consider workplace scenarios. You're in a meeting and someone challenges your idea. Instead of responding thoughtfully, you feel personally attacked. You become defensive, argumentative, maybe even aggressive. Later, you can't understand why you reacted so strongly. Jung would say your shadow contains parts of you that feel inadequate, vulnerable, or incompetent. Feelings you've never allowed yourself to experience consciously. So when someone questions your work, they accidentally trigger this hidden wound, and your shadow takes over. Here's what's really happening. Emotions that you refuse to acknowledge don't stay quiet. They build up pressure until they explode at inappropriate times, often destroying relationships and opportunities in the process. But there's an even more subtle way your shadow sabotages you, and this one might be the most dangerous of all. This is where Jung's shadow work gets really deep. Your shadow doesn't just contain negative traits. It also contains parts of your authentic power that you've been taught to hide. Maybe you learned early that being too confident was arrogant, so you push your natural leadership abilities into the shadow. Now, every time you're on the verge of real success, you unconsciously sabotage yourself because success will require you to embody that confident leader, the part of yourself you've disowned. Take Jennifer, a brilliant software developer who consistently undercharges for her work and downplays her achievements. In her family, women who were too ambitious or too proud were criticized. So Jennifer pushed her natural assertiveness and self-advocacy into the shadow. The result? She watches less qualified male colleagues get promoted while she stays stuck, wondering why her hard work isn't recognized. Her shadow contains the very qualities she needs to succeed, but she's so afraid of them that she'd rather fail than access them. Or consider David, who grew up being told that real men don't show weakness. He pushed his emotional intelligence, vulnerability, and need for connection into the shadow. Now he's successful in business, but completely disconnected from his family and friends. He has everything he thought he wanted, but he feels empty inside. This is a cruel paradox of shadow work. The very parts of yourself that you're most afraid to embrace often contain the keys to your deepest fulfillment. But here's where it gets even more interesting and more dangerous. Jung believed that intimate relationships are where your shadow does the most damage, because these are the relationships where you feel safe enough to let your guard down. And that's exactly when your shadow emerges. Here's something that will make you uncomfortable. You're often most attracted to people who embody the shadow traits you've disowned. If you've pushed your anger into the shadow, you might find yourself drawn to volatile, unpredictable partners. If you've hidden your selfishness, you might be attracted to narcissistic people. Why? Because unconsciously, you're trying to experience these disowned parts of yourself through someone else. But this creates a toxic dynamic where you both love and hate your partner for the same qualities. Sarah, our marketing executive from earlier, consistently dated highly competitive, aggressive men. She was attracted to their drive and ambition, the very qualities she'd hidden in her own shadow. But then she'd spend the relationship criticizing them for being too focused on winning and not caring about others. She was literally falling in love with her own shadow, then trying to destroy it in her partners. Jung said that our intimate partners are mirrors, reflecting back the parts of ourselves we can't see. When your partner does something that triggers intense anger or disgust, they're often showing you a shadow trait you refuse to acknowledge. The couples who fight most bitterly are often fighting their own reflections. They see in their partner the exact traits they hate most about themselves, but because they can't acknowledge these traits consciously, they try to destroy them in their partner instead. This creates relationships built on unconscious warfare. You're not really fighting with your partner. You're fighting with parts of yourself that you refuse to see. And since you can never win a war against yourself, these relationships either end in bitter separation or years of mutual destruction. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. When you finally face your shadow, when you stop refusing to see these parts of yourself, something remarkable happens. You don't become a worse person. You become integrated. You become whole. You become free. In the second part of this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to identify your specific shadow traits, how to integrate them safely, and how this process can literally transform every area of your life. But first, I need you to understand why this work is so difficult, and why most people would rather destroy their lives than face their shadow. Because the truth is, looking at your shadow requires courage. It requires you to admit that you're not the person you think you are. It requires you to face the parts of yourself that you've spent years hiding from everyone, including yourself. But if you're ready for that level of truth, if you're ready to stop letting your hidden self sabotage your life, then part 2 is where the real transformation begins. Before we talk about how to face your shadow, you need to understand why it feels so terrifying to even look at it. Jung knew that most people would rather live in quiet misery than confront their shadow, and there are deep psychological reasons for that. Your ego has been building a story about you for years. I'm a good person. I'm rational. I'm in control. But your shadow is where you've hidden everything that contradicts that story. Facing it means admitting that the version of yourself you've been holding onto has been incomplete, maybe even delusional. You created your shadow to survive. As a child, you learned certain parts of you weren't safe to show. Anger got you punished. Vulnerability got you mocked. Confidence made fragile adults feel threatened. So you buried those parts, thinking it was the only way to stay loved, the only way to stay safe. Even now, your unconscious mind believes that acknowledging your shadow means you'll be abandoned or rejected, maybe even destroyed. And then there's the shame. When you finally see your shadow traits, it can feel like horror. I can't believe I'm like this. What kind of person am I? That shame makes you want to push it back down. But Jung warned that only makes it stronger. Society reinforces this denial. We're told good people don't feel jealousy or rage or selfishness. Spiritual people aren't supposed to have dark thoughts. We're conditioned to believe that admitting to these traits makes us bad. And this is why shadow work takes so much courage. You're not just confronting uncomfortable truths. You're questioning everything you've ever been taught about what makes you worthy of love. But here's the secret Jung discovered. The shadow isn't evil. It's just unconscious. And the moment you bring it into the light, it stops controlling you. So let's get practical. If you want to meet your shadow, start with Jung's trigger map for 1 week. Write down every moment you have a bigger emotional reaction than the situation calls for. Don't analyze, just capture it. You're furious for hours after someone cuts you off in traffic. You're inexplicably angry when a coworker gets recognition. You judge someone for being too loud and confident. Write it down. At the end of the week, look for patterns. Those triggers are clues. If you're enraged by inconsiderate people, maybe your shadow contains your own inconsiderateness. If you're disgusted by attention seekers, maybe your shadow holds a hunger for attention you've never allowed yourself to admit. Next, become projection detective. Make a list of the qualities you hate most in others. Be brutally honest. Then ask yourself, how do I do this too in a different way? Hate manipulative people. Maybe you manipulate with guilt or withdrawal. Hate arrogant people? Maybe you hide arrogance inside false humility. This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about recognition. Now think back to childhood. What parts of you were criticized, punished, or shamed? Were you too sensitive? Then your shadow might contain emotional intelligence you buried. Too aggressive? There's assertiveness in your shadow waiting to be reclaimed. Selfish? Your shadow holds self-advocacy and healthy self-interest. Too much? Your shadow has your authentic power. And then there are your dreams. Jung believed they're direct messages from your shadow. Keep a dream journal. Pay attention to the figures that scare or fascinate you. Being chased by an angry stranger might be your disowned anger trying to reach you. Dreaming of being admired might be the confidence you've locked away. Your shadow isn't here to destroy you. It's here to complete you. Every trait you've buried can be transformed into a source of power and authenticity once it's brought into the light. And this is where integration begins. First, acknowledge without acting. When you notice a shadow trait, don't try to fix it or suppress it. Just name it. I feel competitive right now. I want attention right now. I'm being passive-aggressive right now. Naming creates space. You're no longer driven by it, but you're also not shoving it back into the dark. Second, find a healthy version of the trait. Anger becomes boundaries. Selfishness becomes self-care. Manipulation becomes influence. Vanity becomes self-respect. I worked with someone named Maria who had spent her life as the peaceful one, but underneath was decades of rage over being overlooked. When she brought it into the light, she didn't explode. She transformed it into fierce advocacy. She became a leader. Her rage turned into righteous energy for change. That's the choice integration gives you. Not suppression, not explosion, but conscious expression. You can channel competition into your workouts instead of sabotaging coworkers. You can meet your need for attention through creativity instead of creating chaos. When you integrate your shadow, you don't become darker, you become whole. All the energy you spend hiding those traits comes back to you, fueling creativity, authenticity, and real power. Your relationships change. You stop projecting, and suddenly you see people for who they are. Love becomes possible without the constant battles you didn't even know you were fighting. Your emotions stop hijacking you. Rage, depression, anxiety, they start to make sense. You can respond instead of react. Your work transforms. Healthy aggression helps you negotiate. Authentic confidence lets you lead. You stop sabotaging your own success. Creativity explodes. Energy that once went into hiding your truth now fuels your art, your innovation, your ideas. And spiritually, you grow up. You stop using positivity to avoid your pain. You embrace what Jung called the dark night of the soul, and you come out stronger, kinder, more compassionate. Because the greatest freedom is knowing you don't have to be perfect to love yourself. You can be fully human, light and shadow, and still feel whole. But understanding is enough. You're at a choice point. You can click away from this and let your shadow keep running the show. Or you can begin right now. Start with one exercise. Track your triggers. Question your judgments. Write down your dreams. Begin that conversation with the parts of you you've been avoiding your whole life. Because you don't become whole by being perfect. You become whole by being honest. And that first moment of total honesty is the beginning of real freedom.